So let us just review what we discussed in the last class quickly and then continue with where we stopped. Okay. So we basically talked about, I gave an overview of the textbook that we are going to follow. And I hope you had a chance to look at the textbook. And we basically also talked about what we are going to do in this course. We gave some motivations to study this course. And then we basically try to delve a little bit into explaining what exactly is an OS and what role does an OS do. So we tried to review we said basically OS is a middleware in between user applications and programs and hardware, the CPU, the computer hardware. So computer hardware can be think of it to be at the lowest layer, and user application programs can be thought to be at the top layer. And in between is the OS, which is sitting. So can you also append code from last lecture? Yeah, I have already done that. If you can see the code URL, the link is already there at the end. You can click on that link and you will be able to go to that code. I'll briefly review the code in the today's class itself. But I have already done that. The link of the code is already appended at the end. Okay, so to try to understand what does OS do in between while sitting in between user applications and hardware, what role it does, we try to review some basics of how a program is executed on our computer systems, and we started talking about. We said that if you have to only execute one program at a time, probably you don't need an OS at all. You can probably just need some function calls. User programs may need some function calls in order to be able to interact with the hardware, and by that they should be okay. But the things happens that and earlier, in fact, this was during the early times of mainframe systems, when there were mainframe systems which were controlled by a human operator. The thing that was done was kind of a batch processing, where multiple jobs would be collected into a batch, and then they will be scheduled for execution one by one in a sequential manner. But as time progressed, as we wanted to extract more out of this system, multi-programming concepts came into being, that we should be able to execute multiple programs, that we should be able to schedule and execute multiple programs at the same time. And that would happen through time sharing. So even if you have one CPU, you can actually, because CPU is very fast, it can execute means millions of instructions. It's quite amazing to think about it. So because of that huge power that CPU has, actually we can execute, we can schedule many processes at the same time, and we can execute them using a time sharing mechanism. So one process A executes for some point for some time, and then it moves out, and then process B is executed for the next quanta of time, and so on. So this multiple programming and all that thing, the way the thing which makes it possible to be done is something called virtualization. So this is one of the main role of the OS. So let me have a different color. So virtualization of resources is one of the main role that OS plays, and this will be the main theme of our first part of our course. So we'll spend significant amount of time in discussing about it. And we explained briefly what virtualization means. What do you mean by virtualization here? Basically, we have hardwares like CPU, memory, and disk in our system, and in order to make these hardwares accessible or used by multiple programs or multiple jobs at the same time, we need to create some kind of a virtualization. We need to create multiple virtual CPUs or multiple virtual memories so that each process can have its have its CPU and its memory or whatever that it needs, whatever hardware that it needs, and it can execute without worrying about the other processes. So the thing it actually provides, what OS provides is kind of an abstraction to make this easier for the user programmers. So that user program doesn't have to worry about the low level details. It basically uses these abstractions to actually run its program. So for CPU, there is something called process abstraction or thread abstraction. We'll talk about that in a second. What it basically means, whenever a user has to run a program, it will basically create a process, and that process, and that he doesn't has to worry about how that process is going to execute on the CPU, when that process will get a CPU or when it will not get CPU or so on, or when other processes are going to compete. He doesn't have to worry about. The user is just going to create a process using the abstraction that the OS provides, and then that program will be running on that process. Similarly, there are multiple programs wants to be run, then multiple processes can be created, and those processes will actually be running at the same time, concurrently at the same time. In the sense, as I said, if there is only one CPU, only one instruction can be executing at one particular point of time. So it is not that multiple programs are executing simultaneously, but they are executing concurrently, in the sense that it happens so fast that it appears that multiple programs are actually giving outputs almost at the same time. So, and similarly, each process is allocated its own virtual address space. So in your physical RAM is a single device which has a array of bytes, which have addresses from 0 to what is the maximum size of the memory. And then each process may occupy only part of that main memory, and they will be at some range of, they will be occupying some actual physical addresses, which may be some physical address in this range. For example, for process A and for process B, it will be occupying this part of the physical addresses. But when the user is actually writing a program, he doesn't need to worry about the actual physical addresses. Or when the compiler actually compiles and translates this program into an executable program, the compiler also should not have to worry about these low level details. What will be the actual physical address, where exactly this process will get loaded during runtime, what will be the actual physical addresses where the code and the data will be residing. All those nitty-gritty details, low level details, neither the programmer nor the compiler needs to be concerned about. The programmer and compiler will simply use virtual addresses. So the virtual addresses, as I said, basically will be some kind of a logical address space starting from 0 to some maximum, depending on the architecture of the system. If it is a 4GB, a 32-bit system, you will have a 4GB address space, and so on. So your compiler is going to place these codes or data structures of that things on some of these logical addresses or the virtual addresses from 0 to this thing. And when the program is actually executing, the OS actually, let me write it down. The OS actually sorry. The OS does this translation part. It basically during the runtime, it translates the virtual addresses into the actual physical addresses. So And why OS needs to do it? Because OS knows everything about the system. It knows it knows where OS is the entity which is actually allocating the space to each processes. It knows, it keeps track of where exactly each process is residing in the actual physical memory, and it keeps track of all that information in suitable data structures and all that. And through that, he can and using some hardware, it can actually very efficiently do this translation during runtime. And why we are all doing it? So that basically we want it to make it convenient for the user. This abstraction is all about convenience. We want to make things as convenient for the user program and as efficient also for using this system. So basically we are trying to abstract out the low level details. Low level. Same thing when we'll talk about the CPU virtualization through processes. While when different processes are running, how one process is switched out and then another process is brought into it. There are a lot of details that goes into it to maintain all that thing. There are a lot of low level details which are involved, and we will be delving into those details in a short while. But the beautiful thing is that the user programs doesn't comes to know at all what all those things are going on, and the user is just gets a beautiful illusion that he has the entire CPU to it, and he is basically using the entire CPU for running its own instructions. So let me share you the code again. Okay, so I hope you are able to see the code. So yesterday we ran two programs. One was CPU.c. In this CPU.c, basically this program was meant to illustrate the concept of process abstraction or CPU virtualization. So in this program, we are doing a very simple thing. We are basically taking in a command line argument, which is basically a string here, and then basically printing out that string on the terminal and waiting for few 1 millisecond or whatever this time takes, and then again going back into a loop and doing it basically infinite times until unless you basically terminate the process. So let me show you the output of this program that we shown that day. So this is the Ubuntu terminal on my Windows. I think I have already cleared the output. Okay. So let me run the program again. So if I run a single CPU, we basically, as expected, it is going to print that string again and again till we basically terminate it. But what I wanted to show, that same program, we can instantiate multiple instances of that program through different processes. So when I'm executing this program once, then one separate process is created, and this program runs in that process. And then this through ampersand, I'm making it to a background, and then I show that the terminal is free and I can execute the next process. And I'm again executing the next process, the same program I'm executing in a different process, and I'm passing a different argument to this. And then I can create a third process and give a third argument to it. And as you will see the output, you can see all three processes are actually start giving output out at the same time. So all three processes are executing concurrently. Although this is a tablet PC which I am using, which has only one CPU. Probably it has two cores, but still you can actually create n number of processes. You can actually create infinite number of processes, and I think you should be able to run as many of them. And this is made possible through the concept of process, which is an abstraction for a CPU or virtualization of a CPU. The other program that we showed yesterday was this memory program related to memory virtualization. And in this program, what we demonstrated was we created a integer pointer. We allocated a memory for it. So, and then we try to print the address of that pointer wherever that pointer is basically allocated. Get PID is basically it gets the process ID. So I'm also printing the process ID for that. And then I am taking the command line argument, converting into it integer value, and initializing the pointer to that value. And I'm going to increment the value stored at that pointer by 1 in this infinite loop. And I'm just going to print that value. So if you run this program, let us say if I start with count 1, so it is printing the address, and then it's going to increment the count 1 at a time, and it's going to go an infinite loop. And if I actually run two programs, the other one, let me initialize with 5. And let me kill all of them. Did not kill. It becomes difficult to kill when they are going to background. So what I wanted to show here, see these two different processes created with different process ID 4675 and 4676, and as I said, these are two different processes, so they will be allocated to different actual physical memory in your RAM. But if you see the address which is printed by the pointer, if you see the address is almost the same, because it's the same program which we are executing. So the compiler, as I said, the compiler is going to translate this program and will generate memory addresses which will belong to the virtual space. So it doesn't needs to know about the actual physical address location of the pointer. It is only going to give you the virtual address location, and that virtual address location is getting printed here. But these two pointers will actually be stored at two different locations. If it was not so, then they will not be able to increment them independently. Here the first program is incrementing separately 1, 2, 3, 4 separately, and the second program is incrementing from 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. So that means they are actually two different actual physical memory locations. They are not the same memory locations, and that is what we were talking about when we basically I was explaining this memory virtualization through the concept of virtual address space. So what is in effect is happening is that although you have this one CPU and one RAM is acting as, or it seems like there are many CPUs and many large private memory. So I hope this thing is clear. So our first part of our course, or the first in the book also, the first piece of this book is actually related to this virtualization. It delves deeper into the exact mechanism how this CPU and memory virtualization is done, what all supports is needed to the hardware, and what are data structures you need, what kind of policies are needed, what kind of mechanisms are needed to implement them. And that is what we are going to discuss in the first part of the second part of the course is going to be about concurrency issues. So when we are working on many things at the same time, as I said, we are running many programs, and sometimes it will happen we'll be doing many things at once even in the same program. So I have not talked about thread. So within a process, let us say you have a process, there can be multiple threads which can be thought of a lightweight process, but they are part of one single same process, and they will be sharing some important they may be either sharing a part of the code or part of the data of that process and so on, and they may be executing different part of the program at the same time. So they may be at different portions of they will be executing different set of instructions and so on. So within a single process, for example, when I'm using this software like Microsoft Word or Microsoft OneNote, so there are multiple threads running in this same program. One thread is basically taking as the input of my pen and reading it. Another thread is basically understanding it and writing it on this notepad. Another thread may be doing spell checking. Another thread may be doing some other things. So multiple threads are doing different things within a same program. And when this happens, there can be a lot of problems that may happen. And actually, these problems came in the OS itself, because as I've seen, the OS program is a very complicated software, and it has to juggle a lot of things at the same time. When there are multiple programs running and background things are running, it has to actually manage multiple things at the same time within the same program. So very interesting and very deep problems can actually arise, which needs to be addressed properly, otherwise there will be serious inconsistency issues. I think let me first show the code, and then you will be able to understand this better, what I'm trying to explain here. So I hope you are able to see the thread.c file. So you may not be able to understand the code, right? If somebody has done a multi-thread programming or pthread library, if he has used in C, then he may be able to understand. Otherwise, you will not be able to understand the functions and other things. But it's doing very simple, not much. I can explain you in a simple way. It is having a one global variable counter, and two global variables, one counter and another is loops, and it takes a command line argument. It converts the command line argument to integer, and that is basically the number of times the loop will run. So this we are going to basically run a loop for some amount of time, and that number of times we are taking as a command line input, and we are creating two threads. We are creating basically two threads, and in each thread we are passing this function. So each thread is going to basically execute this particular function worker. This particular function is going to be executed by both the threads P1 and P2 that we are creating. And what is being done in this worker thread? Basically, we are running a single for loop from 0 to number of times that the number of times we input from the command line, and it is going to increment this counter, which is a common shared variable. So this counter is a global variable. So for both worker thread, this counter is a shared data. So both are going to increment this counter value by 1 within this loop. So if you run this program, what do you think the output should be? So let us say if I run this, sorry, Peter. Let us say I give the number of loops as 1000. So what do you think the output should be? So this main program will print the final value. So when both the two threads complete and they join back in the main program, then you are printing the final value of the counter. So anybody can answer what will be the output of this program if you are passing the command line in the argument of loop, the argument as 1000. So the number of times each loop will run is 1000. So what will be the final value of the counter? Anybody can answer? 2000. Yeah, good. So this is what will happen. So okay, now let me increment to 10,000. What do you think the output should be?
20,000.
20,000. Good. No problem. Let me increment it to 1 lakh. What do you think the output should be? So it is become a very trivial, so nobody wants to answer. It's overflow. Overflow. Why do you think overflow will happen?
Is 60,000 cents.
Sorry?
Max size of int is 60,000 cents, sir. So
Max size of int is
60,000 cents, sir. It can hold only values up to that. After that, it will again.
so can't it hold the value of if you are passing 1 lakh, can't it hold the value of 2 lakhs? Int is for 4 bytes, so you can store sufficient amount of data. So somebody answers greater than things between 10,000 and 20,000. Okay. So who is roll number 67? Can you answer? Can you tell me the reason why it should be between 1 lakh and 2 lakhs? Why not exactly 2 lakhs? So let me run it, and this is the output that you are getting. So it seems roll number 67 is correct. So can you give the intuition behind it?
Sir, I'm not too sure, but maybe because both are running concurrently, then like earlier, because the number was small, the first 10,000 used to get over and next 10,000 would start. So it could still reach 20,000. But now with 100,000, maybe it doesn't have that much of.
Yeah, so let me tell you. So let me run it some more time. So one time I ran, it gave this output. Another time I ran, what should the output be? If I run the same program with the same argument, will you expect the same answer 100954? May not be. You may get a completely different answer. And sometimes you may get the actual expected answer, which is 2 lakh. So what is happening here? Haven't we been taught that computers are deterministic and these programs are going to give the same answer every time you run? Why are they giving arbitrary answers for different time when it is running? And that is and it is not the same answer. It's varying. The answer output is also varying. It seems it's acting whimsically. So the very notion of computer being a deterministic machine is thrown out of the picture. Okay, so let me explain you what is happening here. The problem here is that there is a shared data which is being accessed by more than one thread. The shared data here is the counter variable that both the thread were working upon together. They were basically doing counter plus plus. They were incrementing the value of counter at the same time. So when we're writing this counter plus plus in a high level language, it seems to be a single instruction. So so even if thread 1 is running at one point of time and it gets switched out, and then thread 2 runs on the CPU, it should first execute this counter plus plus, and then next thread should execute counter plus plus. So all the updates should happen properly. But the problem is this high level instruction, which is in low level assembly, if you look into how this get translated into low level assembly, there will be first of all a load operation, which will load the value of the current value of the counter into the register. Then there will be an increment instruction, and then there will be a store instruction. So there will be this single instruction is actually made up of three or multiple instructions, multiple assembly level instructions, which are here in this case, there are three assembly level instructions that are happening. So this single instruction may not be able to execute atomically. If it was executing atomically, then our output would have been consistent and correct always. But because one thread is doing this load, increment, store, and another thread is also doing load, increment, and store, it may happen then before all those three happens, suppose the first thread does load, increment, and then there is a context switch, and another thread comes into picture and it starts doing loads, increment, and store. And then again, when it goes back, then actual store happens. So because of switching in between these things, because of not executing this single instruction in an atomic means completing all these three before switching to another process, this problem of inconsistent result is coming. So we'll be delving into more details. If you have not understood why, we can show some example. You can take some example. You can take an example of one and try to do see if switch happens in between, then what will be the result? The result will not be proper. If all of them happens together and then switch happens, then results will be proper. So when we are doing the concurrent execution, we need to ensure that all these instructions happen atomically. So that issue needs to be resolved, and how that happens is not so easy. To ensure that is not so easy, and we'll see there are a lot of primitives that are designed to help OS to do that, and there is a hardware support is also needed to make it possible for concurrent programs or multi-thread programs to run simultaneously without giving this inconsistent output.
What do you mean by atomically in this context?
Atomically in this context, what do you mean by atom? Atom is in a literary sense in our science, atom is the smallest unit which cannot be subdivided further. So that is the concept here. So we're saying with this instruction should be treated as a single. This counter plus plus, if this increment happens atomically, then it will not be a problem. But what will happen, as I said, this to execute this instruction in assembly language, we'll have to execute three instructions. One is load instruction, where the value of this counter, wherever the memory address is there, from that memory address, that value will be loaded into a register, and then that register value will be incremented, and then from that register, the output will be stored back to that physical address of this counter. So those three things are happening, but these are three separate instructions which the hardware is executing. So in between, so these are not executing atomically. This set of three instructions is not being executed atomically. In between, there may be a context switch. So if we allow multiple programs to run simultaneously or multiple threads to run simultaneously, so OS can decide that after it has done load and increment, let us say the time counter that it had assigned to this process or this thread, if it has exhausted, it may assign to switch to pause this process and give the turn to the next process. So before store happens, the next thread starts executing, and when that happens, your output of this counter is going to get messed up, and you can see. So then you can just I want to save some time here, so that's why I'm not going to take an example here. Otherwise, it's very easy. Or let me just take an example if it is not clear. So let us say initial value of counter is 0. Sorry. What happened? So, so let us say the counter value was initialized to 0. And then two thread T1 and T2, they both try to increment this counter. So T1 thread tried to load the counter value into its register. So it will load the, let us say the register of this counter value is going to get the value of 0. Then increment operation happens, then this value is going to get incremented to 1. And before store happens, let us say the T2 is given the turn to execute. So T2 is also going to do the load, and let us say the T2 register is also going to load the value from the actual memory. So in your actual memory, the value of counter is still 0. So it is going to load the value 0 here. It is also going to do increment. So this value will get incremented to 1. And let us say it gets opportunity to do store also. So it is going to update this 1 value back into your physical memory, which is 1. Now the turn comes back to T1, and now T1 executes store. So what value is going to store there? It is going to read this value of the current register, which is 1 here, and it is going to update this value again to 1, which basically means the value will remain, final value will remain 1. Although the final value should have come 2, because both T1 and T2 have done 1 increment. So the ideal thing was the counter value should have got 2. But in this case, because the manner in which switching happened, the final value remained 1. If a different order of switching may happen, the final value may, in this case, probably there are only two possibilities, 1 or 2. But if you do more times, there may be multiple possibilities. So that's why we were getting a different time when we were executing different, and we were getting different output. So you cannot predict, you cannot deterministically say that this is going to be the output if you don't handle this problem. So I hope got some clarity why this problem is happening.
Sir, can we be?
Sorry.
Yeah. One more question, sir. Sir, what I was asking was for the smaller ranges it worked properly, right? So
Yeah.
is it because the numbers are getting too big, that's why the load and the increment instructions are taking time?
No.
And that's why.
No. The problem is when there are only few increment is happening only few times, the probability of that switching in between is little less. But when the numbers are large, the probability of switching in between those three instruction is higher. You are understanding? So when you increment only 1,000 times, it may not have switched in between. So it would have completed the 3 and then would have switched, because as I said, it gives a certain time quanta before switching it. Within that time quanta, probably that 1,000 increment already happened. But when we increment to 1 lakh, then within that time quanta, probably the full 1 lakh increment did not happen, and in between it switched in between. So the probability of that inconsistency that increases when we have incremented this thing. So for smaller, that's why the problem many times the biggest problem with this kind of programs are when you write a multi-threaded program. For most of the scenario, it may seem to be appear correctly because you may not be doing a lot of things there, and the program may output perfectly fine. But at very unexpected time, the error may come out, and it is very difficult to trace out also. For this simple program where you are just incrementing, it's very easy to trace out this kind of problem. But when you're writing a complex program where exactly this inconsistency is happening, it's very, very difficult to debug. Debugging a single sequential program is very easy, but debugging a multi-threaded program is very hard, because you cannot exactly trace out where exactly this problem happens. That's why there are a lot of primitives that are designed to ensure that these problems do not occur at all, and we have to use those primitives in order to write a safe multi-threaded program. So I think there are some other questions and we are up with time. So I'm not going to take, I'll just answer these questions that other people have asked. I guess it can, but the chances of context switch is that in small time, yes. So I think somebody has already told that thing. So basically all depends on the time interval between two processes, time taken to finish a process. Time interval between two processes is not just that single criteria. We'll see how OS schedules different processes. So time interval is just one criteria. There are many other criteria of switching. We'll talk about that more detail later on. The time for which each runs. I think if it is a very short process, you probably won't get a context switch in the middle. Yeah, I think all the same thing. The people are giving their own answers to that, and they were quite right in their understanding. More details will come. More details as when we discuss further details of the exact mechanism of how these things are implemented. You will get more clarity. So till now, at least you got an idea, and we will continue from here in the next class. So I'll just take the poll for the feedback for today's class, and then you all can quit. Just a second. Yeah, anybody called to ask?
Sir, I just want to add one point here that in this program we were creating threads. So by the time the second thread creates, the short loop intervals may have already finished for the first thread. So that could be another reason that the less loop intervals are finishing. I mean, they are not colliding with each other.
Yeah, that can also be because thread creation also takes time, you are saying. So it may happen even before the other thread is created, the first thread executes. That is also a possibility because the workload here was quite less. So that is also that has the same understanding that what I gave. So yeah, I don't deny that.
Right.
So I'm just opening this poll for the feedback.